Happy Friday, everyone. John Lorden here with your weekly episode of BrainScratch. Hope you had a nice week, and thank you so much for joining me here today. Of course, this is the last episode of BrainScratch that we're going to have before Halloween, so we are doing another Halloween-related case, and I have to give a very big thank you to Christy Arnhart, formerly known as Christy Strayciner. Congratulations, Christy. And thank you so much for pulling together the research for today's episode. It is truly a brain scratch. This is a bit different because in today's case, we have a whole court process that has gone on. But by the time we get to the end of it, I think there's still a very big question of what happened in the case of Joel Lovelien. Let's go ahead and get started by learning about where this takes place. It is in Grand Forks, North Dakota, which is the third largest city in the state of North Dakota. According to the 2010 census, the city's population was 52,838. And in Grand Forks on Washington Street is a bar slash kind of mini casino known as the Broken Drum. And this is where a very unfortunate occurrence happens somewhere out here in the parking lot. The man whose life was senselessly and tragically taken away is named Joel Lovelien. Let's learn a bit about him from this memorial page. Former Great Falls resident Joel Lovelien, 38, of Grand Forks, North Dakota, died Saturday from injuries received in an assault in Grand Forks. And that was Saturday, October 27th, 2007. It was, he went out for the evening dressed up in a hockey jersey. He took his fiancée with him. She was dressed up as a mechanic, and they were going to a bar where there was a lot of other people dressed up in costume. And unfortunately, that adds a little bit of a twist to the investigation, but we'll get to that. Survivors include his fiancée, Heather Eastling of Grand Forks. I believe she has since moved back to her home state of Texas, and his daughter, Alexa of Grand Forks. That was from a previous marriage. Joel Heath Lovelien was born October 8th, 1969 in Bismarck, North Dakota, the son of Marvin and Judy Lovelien. Joel spent his early years in Grand Forks, then moved to Bagley, Minnesota, graduating from Bagley High School in 1988. Joel graduated from the University of North Dakota in Grand Forks with a degree in math and computer science. He worked in information services at the Grand Forks Clinic and later as a technical systems analyst for All True Health System. Joel married originally in 1992. Unfortunately, they did get divorced, and he was getting lined up to get married again. Joel loved life. He especially loved spending time with his daughter, Alexa. He found the love of his life in Heather, and they were busy planning their wedding for August 8th, 2008. He also enjoyed golf and bowling, along with spending time with his numerous friends. He was an avid UND Fighting Sioux hockey fan, University of North Dakota. And here we have a picture with Joel and some of the people that meant the most to him. His daughter, Alexa, on his right, and on his left, his fiancée. So what happened in this case? Thankfully, there has been a NBC Dateline episode done on this case. I'm going to have links to it. It is still available online, at least here in the U.S. So I'm going to have links to that in the description box below. It's a very interesting case, and there's a lot going on in terms of kind of the court proceedings. I think we're actually going to dive into a little bit more detail than the Dateline episode did here in terms of some of the court information. But if you want to kind of see the faces and put the names to the faces, you might want to check out the Dateline information as well. And here we have another photo of Joel with his fiancée, Heather Eastling. A cowboy, a clown, a lion, and a hockey fan walk into a bar. It sounds like the opening of a joke, but the punchline isn't funny. The hockey fan winds up dead in the parking lot outside the bar, and his killer fades away into the night. North Dakota has more bars per capita than any other state in the nation. On October 27, 2007, a group of about 40 or 50 20-somethings had chartered a bus for a Saturday night slalom through the city's many watering holes. That's the other interesting thing about this. This bus is in the parking lot when this happens, and you're talking about 40 to 50 bus partiers essentially being out there. So shouldn't we have a bunch of witnesses to this crime? Well, it depends. Did the bus leave before it happened? One of the big questions in this case. The bus pulled up to the Broken Drum and the revelers spilled out. Inside, Joel Lovelien, dressed in the bright green jersey of his favorite hockey team, the University of North Dakota's Fighting Sioux, was already celebrating Halloween with his fiancée, Heather Eastling. She was dressed as a mechanic. Lovelien had met the grade school teacher less than a year earlier, but they had already set a wedding date. Lovelien indulged in a cigar and played blackjack. At about 11:30 p.m., said Eastling, Lovelien got a call on his cell phone and went outside to take it. Soon, Lovelien came back inside, recalled Eastling, and said, "Hey, somebody got left by the bus. I'm going to go check on him." He kissed me and went outside, said his fiancée. A few minutes later, another bar patron came running back inside, yelling, "Call 911." Heather runs outside and finds Lovelien on the pavement. Joel was laying there with blood all over the cement near his head in the parking lot, recalled Eastling, crying. We couldn't get a response out of him. Lovelien was rushed to the ER in the same hospital where he worked as a computer technician, but the doctors could not save him. They later determined that he'd been beaten so badly that the bones in his face had broken and he had choked to death on his own blood. At the Broken Drum, authorities were scrambling to find possible witnesses and suspects. The party bus had left, but they got descriptions of individuals seen near Lovelien or the bus: a clown, a cowboy, a gangster. It's really a gangster rapper. When I hear gangster, I think of 1930s Al Capone or something like that. It's actually a costume for a gangster rapper. A construction worker, and the police dashed out to look for them around the city before they could take off their costumes and disappear. So that's one of the real challenges in this case, just right from the get-go, is you have everyone in costume. Now, does that help or hinder the case? I think it probably hinders it a little bit, because when you see someone in costume, yeah, it's going to kind of click in your memory in terms of what costume they're wearing and maybe some details of the costume. But the person's identity, I think, kind of falls to the background. And that's why in a lot of the coverage that you'll see about this case, they're actually referring specifically just to the types of costumes: the clown, the cowboy, the gangster, or the construction worker. There's a few more that we're going to touch on as well as we continue forward here. They had also found a piece of evidence at the murder scene. It was yellow and had a spot of blood on it. It looked like a foot or a paw from a costume. Soon the police found the clown at another Grand Forks bar. He was crying and his hands were shaking. The clown, a 22-year-old farmer, told police he was crying because he'd had a fight with his girlfriend. But he clammed up and demanded a lawyer when investigators brought him to the police station for questioning. And that's one of the good things about the Dateline coverage on this, is you can actually hear some of this conversation for yourself. They've got recordings from the interrogation room and see how these people are handling themselves. And I have to say, the clown, and they do catch up to the cowboy as well. There's a lot of very strange behavior that's going on here. A lot of anger that is being shown towards the police as well for what's going on here. And possibly even some lies right off the bat. Let's go ahead and continue with the coverage here. The police also found the cowboy, but they say he gave them a false name and birth date and became physically aggressive. So much so that they actually wound up handcuffing him, but they didn't actually arrest him. According to police, the cowboy did ask an interesting question, though. He wanted to know if the victim was wearing a green shirt with the initials UND on it, like Lovelien's North Dakota hockey jersey. The next day, police asked other witnesses to come back to the police headquarters, and we start getting some more info. While the bus was at the Broken Drum, the partygoers said two of the passengers got into a fight outside the bar. One was a friend of theirs who was dressed as a hunter. The other was a guy in a crude lion costume fashioned out of a yellow hoodie. And we can see a little photo of it. I know it's kind of a tiny photo right down here. After the fight, they told the lion he couldn't get back on the bus. Before it pulled away, they said they saw the lion speaking to a guy in a green hockey jersey. 2 days after Lovelien's death, a nursing student named Travis Stay walked into police headquarters. Travis Stay is 23 years old, and he tells police that a man dressed as a hunter had punched him out in the parking lot. They saw bruises on his face and cuts on his hands. He told detectives that he'd been wearing a yellow lion costume made out of a hoodie that night and that he'd tossed it in the trash. "Why did you throw it away?" asked Detective Dwayne Simon. "Because it was full of blood," answered Stay. So the yellow paw that was found, that was mentioned in the article earlier, obviously is the paw for this costume. Apparently, he still had one of the paws with him. And I've seen pictures of the paw, and it's literally just a little microscopic, well, not microscopic, slightly bigger than microscopic, but it is literally one dot of blood that is on the paw. It's not nearly enough to assume that this is the guy, at least that was wearing the paw while he was just obliterating this poor man on the ground with his fists. And information that comes out from analysts about the injuries to his hands don't really seem to support the fact that he could have been punching someone, considering the amount of damage that was done to Joel's face. So a lot to keep in mind when it comes to the physical evidence here. Police do recover his costume, and he also gives them his shoes, which had blood on them. The blood on his shoes actually turns out to be his own. The blood on the glove that was left behind, I have not seen an analysis of that blood. Like I mentioned, it's one little speck, but I haven't seen if it turned out to be Travis's or Joel's blood. And by the way, he let police recover his costume and gave them his shoe, all without a search warrant or even a lawyer present, because he was saying he was innocent. He had nothing to hide. He said he was so drunk that night that he couldn't remember what had happened at the bar or talking to Lovelien, but he knew he hadn't hurt anyone. When DNA test results came back, some of the blood on Stay's hoodie and pants matched the blood of the victim. And while no one had seen Stay throw a punch at Lovelien, the bus riders said he'd been in a fight with the hunter. And then later that night, yet another man said Stay had thrown a punch at him, even after Lovelien's death. So this is one of the things that's really bizarre about this case. We have a guy that is swearing, I wouldn't have gotten violent, it's just not me. But by the way, I was basically blackout drunk. I don't remember anything that was going on. We have him get in a fight before Joel's death, disappear from the scene. We certainly know that he was there because Joel's blood somehow winds up on his clothing. So we know that he was there for some violence that occurred to Joel. And by the time the authorities get there, he's gone. So for some reason, he leaves the scene, but he just can't remember any of what's going on around all this. I got to tell you guys right from the outset, I'm already very suspicious. There's some other arguments that I don't think are super strong about the fact that, well, Travis is only 5'9" and Joel is like 6'3" or 6'4". I really don't think that that's that big of a deal. I know that there are guys smaller than me that can whip my butt. It's the size when it comes to fist fighting like that isn't necessarily always that easy of an indicator, but unfortunately, that's one of the assumptions that we see in this case that will kind of pop up time and time again. But then we have the fact that later in the night, there's this guy walking down the street. We'll hear some information from his testimony, and Travis just comes running up on this guy and takes a swing at him. So what is going on with this kid while he's blackout drunk? And can he really trust the fact that he wouldn't have hurt someone when we have basically two attacks that are confirmed that we know that he was part of? Really, really strange. Here we do have a picture of the sweater and some of the blood on it. And once again, at least from the photos I've seen, the amount of blood on the sweater is pretty serious. This photo doesn't really do it justice. Once again, if you watch the Dateline segments, you'll see some better photos of it. On one side in particular, there's a lot of blood. I can't tell you if that blood is necessarily Joel's or Travis's, though. We know that Travis has a cut on his face. Here's an actual photo you can see, and this is taken by the Grand Forks Police Department, so I would assume this is at least 2 days later. We can see there's a cut right under his eye. It's already scabbed up and is healing up a bit. And also there's a cut in his eyebrow. line. So he certainly was probably bleeding quite a bit. Cuts around that area can be pretty nasty. A lot of blood can come from it. And you can see, of course, all the bruising that's around his eye as well. So what else can we learn? Let's move on to the Star Tribune. This is an article from December 10th, 2007. UND nursing student held in man's beating death in Grand Forks. Police say Travis Stay, 23, was arrested Monday at his Grand Forks home and charged with Class AA murder. The UND directory lists Stay as a senior in the school's nursing program. It's another weird synergy that's going on with this case is you have Joel being a huge UND fan, and at least from the story we're hearing, it seems like he's going out there to help Travis after Travis has possibly been knocked out by someone else. And Travis just happens to go to that school as well. Not to mention the fact they both kind of work in the same career path. Travis is going through a nursing program. Joel works in IT for a hospital. So it's just there's a lot of strange synergy that's going on with this. His bail was set at $100,000. Lovelien was found in the bar's parking lot with severe head wounds after 11 p.m. He was pronounced dead by All True Hospital emergency room personnel. Police had said they were seeking 4 men, 2 dressed as the Penguin and the Joker from Batman movies, 1 dressed as Minnesota Gophers fan, and another dressed in a yellow hooded sweatshirt. It's interesting because even in the Dateline coverage, they mention the Penguin and the Joker. They even show a really brief photo of the Joker. But for the rest of the coverage we're covering here, I didn't bump into any other information about those guys in those particular costumes. So I'm not sure why police wanted to question them, but it seems like they were probably questioned and just dismissed. It seems like they really didn't have anything to do with this. Also, I didn't see much mention of this Minnesota Gophers fan either. Though it is worth noting, apparently the Gophers and the Fighting Sioux have a pretty intense rivalry. I even found an article that was talking about it that said, if you want to see their rivalry, just search it on YouTube. You'll see video after video after video of these teams just going at each other. So pretty intense rivalry between these teams. Could that possibly be some motivating factor in Joel being hurt because he's wearing the UND stuff? I don't know. Lovelien's family had offered a $5,000 reward for information, and there were over 200 leads that were followed up on and approximately 100 interviews, according to Police Sergeant Bill Mackey. So we have a man now charged with murder and being held in custody, and let's just go through the costumes and learn a little bit more about who are the men behind the costumes here at True Noir Stories. .wordpress.com. So let's start with the clown that we heard about, John DeZiel, who officers observed crying on 2 occasions and noted that his hands were shaking. According to police reports, John stated, quote, "I guess things got out of hand tonight." The clown is really important in terms of setting up a timeline, so keep him in mind. We'll be talking about him more as we go through this. Then we have the cowboy, 23-year-old Bryce Larson. He's the one that gave police an incorrect name and birth date. He's the one that became physically aggressive. He's the one that asked that question about is the victim the guy that was wearing a green shirt with the initials UND? And then on top of all that, according to a detective's report, Bryce admitted to seeing a large guy wearing a UND Fighting Sioux jersey in the parking lot. He said that this man had blood on his face, but no significant injuries. Now, that is very curious. One of the things that happens early on in this investigation are the investigators determine that the bus leaves, and then Joel is likely harmed after the bus has left. But if that is true, how do we have someone, this is the guy that basically organized the party bus. How does he see Joel outside? And in particular, why would he say that he saw him with blood on his face? That's really, really bizarre. There is some video footage of Joel in the bar, and there doesn't appear to be any blood on his face. It's never been mentioned in any of the descriptions I've seen as being part of his costume. It's not like he was dressing up like he was a hockey player with a blacked out tooth and stuff like that. He was just really dressed up as kind of a fan of of his favorite team. So very curious why this quote is coming in this way, but will he stick by that story as we get into the actual trial? I bet you guys already know the answer to that, but let's continue. There was also the hunter. Of course, this is the guy that got into the fight with the lion. The men from the party bus claimed that an unknown man dressed in a homemade lion costume had grabbed the hunter by the collar and pulled him to the ground without provocation. The hunter's name is James Wavra, and he's 22. They struggled on the ground for a bit. The lion threw a punch at James but missed, while James threw a punch and connected with the lion's face. During his court testimony, James further recalled hitting the man dressed as a lion a total of 1 or 2 times and kicking him in the shoulder or the side of his face. Then we have the gangsta and the construction worker. Later on, Bryce, along with 2 of his friends, again attempted to confront the guy in the lion costume and give him some grief. Now, this whole thing seems kind of weird to me. We've got the cowboy, the gangsta, and the construction worker. They've already heard, at least, I don't know if they saw it for themselves, but they probably heard that there was some kind of fight between the hunter and the lion, and that the hunter put the lion down effectively. I mean, just drilled the guy in the eye probably more than once. But then they're all going to go out there to give him some grief. What exactly is that about? What does that mean? Now, we do know at some point the cowboy spoke to the lion and told the lion, "You're not welcome back on the bus," which raises another question. Why in some of these descriptions are people saying that they didn't really know who the lion was? Supposedly he came on the party bus. So just a lot of strange kind of semi-conflicting information here. Anyway, so these 3 guys decided they're going to give him some grief. The friends accompanying Bryce were later identified as Mitchell Dahlen, 23, wearing the gangster rapper costume, and Josh DeZiel, 23, who was dressed as the construction worker. Does that last name sound familiar? Yeah, because he's the brother of the clown. However, according to their court testimonies, neither Bryce, Mitchell, nor Josh would exchange any further words with the man dressed as a lion, because Big Joel Lovelien in his bright green hockey jersey had now appeared at the Lions' side. Instead, they spoke with Lovelien but insisted that the conversation wasn't heated. Mitchell, a devoted Gophers hockey fan, reportedly joked about the rivalry between his team and the Fighting Sioux, saying, "We were laughing about it, just saying can't wait till they play next." After that, the 3 men insist they got back on the bus. Now, I don't know if I believe that interaction at all. Quite honestly, when some people lie, they try to keep elements of the truth that they're worried could be discovered and kind of work them into their lie. Like if there was someone else that might have heard this conversation saying, no, I heard these guys, they were arguing about sports stuff. They could come back at that point and say, no, we told you, we were talking to them. Hey, we were just kind of ribbing each other about having rival teams. I don't know. And you've got all kinds of different people. Some people are very extreme sports fans. I can tell you hockey here in the state of Minnesota is huge. People love hockey out here. I think it's one of the primary states in terms of the United States for hockey fans. So is that enough to have provoked these guys to attack him, that they saw a rival jersey and that he was helping this guy that they were supposedly going out there to give grief to? Or is it more believable to think that we have Travis in his blacked out, drunken state, not realizing what's going on, and then he starts attacking Joel? Or that he's feeling like he's been emasculated because of what happened to him. So when he comes to, he then decides to attack Joel, a guy that's 6'3" or 6'4", 80 pounds heavier and 6-7 pounds taller, or 6-7 inches taller than him. I don't know. And that's really where this mystery is. It's really about, do you believe the guys on the bus? And we're already having timing difficulties. I mean, you guys can tell that already. Obviously, if we're talking about this, once again, we're having information here where it seems like there should be now 3 witnesses to seeing Joel out there. So the bus had to have been there when Joel was outside, supposedly to go help Travis. So how close are we talking about? I mean, we're literally talking minutes that are going on here of opportunity for Joel to have been hurt. And the question of if the bus was there or not, at least according to the information that we're reviewing, sure seems like the bus was actually there whenever what went down went down. But then you have to consider the fact that you've got 40 or 50 people that are just not talking. Could they have really been silenced like that? People that are just part of this party bus thing? Or was there some reason they didn't see it? Is this taking place maybe not necessarily as close to the bus or too close to the bus where most people aren't seeing what's going on outside? This is a type of environment where they're doing jello shots in there. Could it be that they were just preoccupied if you were actually in the bus and you didn't notice what was going on outside? So let's now get into some of the information that comes out during the court case. And I want to give a really big thank you to the Grand Forks Herald. They did really good coverage of it, and we have a lot of points to address because of their excellent coverage. The first article we're going to touch on is the taxi driver that actually picks up Travis that night eventually, and what were his impressions? What did he notice? The taxi driver who picked up Travis Stay the night Joel Lovelien was killed told jurors Thursday that the defendant on trial for murder got into his cab with bloody, shaking hands. I looked up at his face, and he was blood-covered, hairline to the neck, and covering the whole front of his face. Kind of like it was a mask, Paul Balstead testified. So that is a very interesting description, and I showed you where the wounds were. The only two cuts that appear to be on his face are on his eye, and this guy's saying he literally had blood from his hairline all the way down and literally covering his entire face. How could that have happened from just having two cuts at eye level? Perhaps if he was laying down for a period of time, if he went somewhere and laid down and he was just bleeding all over his face, I mean, you could certainly have it move in different directions. Unfortunately, that blood would not be tested, so we'll never know. Was that actually Joel's blood? Was that Travis's blood? But certainly very suspicious. Stay 24 hailed the cab just after 1 a.m., almost a mile from the Broken Drum bar. A few times the cabbie asked Stay where he wanted to go, and it wasn't until the third or fourth time that Balstead said he got a response. It was like he was focusing on something else. He had something on his mind, the driver said. He was like staring out into space. He said that he dropped Stay off at his house and drove away. On cross-examination, Balstead stood his ground when pressed on his testimony that Stay smelled of alcohol but seemed sober. The defense has argued that the 5'9", 160-pound Stay was too intoxicated to harm anyone, let alone Lovelien, who stood at 6'4" and weighed 240 pounds. The defense stuck to its argument that it wasn't Stay who killed Lovelien, but a group of men who left the Broken Drum on the party bus. 4 of the 5 men labeled as possible culprits have testified, all denying involvement in the beating death of the 38-year-old father. And this is what brings a little bit of a big problem into this case. It appears that the investigators assumed that the bus was not there when Joel was attacked. So because of that, even though they did track down some of these men and interview them, I don't know if they processed them forensically. I don't know if they even thought to look at their shoes, see if there was a blood spot on their shoes, look at their hands, get photos of their hands. None of that information, at least, has been presented. And based on what happens with the court case, I really, really doubt that any of that information was collected as well. Defense attorney Joel Friedberg continued his questioning of Bryce Larson, a man who wore a cowboy costume. Referring to a transcript of a police interview, Friedberg suggested Larson and other guys were talking trash with Lovelien as he stood in the bar parking lot near Stay, who had just scuffled with Larson's friend Wavra, who was dressed as a hunter. Larson said he wasn't razzing anyone and that any trash talking concerned the Wavra-Stay fight. It wasn't directed towards Lovelien, who Larson said he thought was a bouncer. I don't know if that's really true or not. It just seems like it would be very convenient if you wanted someone to think, well, of course I didn't attack this guy. I thought he was a bouncer. And that's the first that we're hearing about that. Of course, we don't hear about that from the information he gives to investigators when they're talking to him. But the attorney Friedberg kept on. The truth is that it got out of hand, and you three guys with about 600 pounds between you kicked the hell out of those guys, didn't you? Larson denied it. The other two guys Friedberg referred to were Mitchell Dallin and Josh DeZiel. Dallin, who was dressed as a gangster rapper, testified Wednesday that he wasn't involved. DeZiel, who wore a construction worker costume, told jurors the same on Thursday. DeZiel said they exchanged no words with the guy in the yellow, and the discussion they had with the man in green was not heated. Once again, it's just not making a whole lot of sense. We have one of these guys saying, yeah, three of us were going to go out there and we were going to give him some grief. But then they walk out there and they don't say anything to the guy that they were going out there to speak to at all. And instead they have friendly sports talk with this other guy. Like, just thinking of the intent and the mentality. We've got young 20-year-old guys. We've got people drinking. Everyone's fired up. There's just been a fight out in the parking lot. Hey, we're going to go out there. We're going to give this guy some. Hey, what's up? Oh, you're into sports too? No. It just doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen like that. I do not believe that, especially that there was no words towards the guy in yellow. That was your whole reason for leaving the bus, the same bus that has all the alcohol you want to party on, all your friends are on, you're getting ready to leave to go to the next bar, but you're literally putting everything on pause to go give this guy some grief, and then you don't talk to him at all. It doesn't make sense. Josh DeZiel's brother, John, who wore the clown costume that night, also testified. According to police reports read in court, officers saw John DeZiel crying on 2 occasions and once said, "I guess things got out of hand tonight." John DeZiel said he was emotional because he'd been arguing with his girlfriend. That was one story he gave. And then at a later time, he said because the events of that night reminded him of when he and his brother had been jumped a year earlier in the parking lot of the Cuckoo's Nest, and he woke up in a pool of blood. And he was so emotional about it that obviously it made him cry, and his hands were shaking when the police ran into him. I don't know if I believe that either. Now, there's something very important to know about the clown. The footage from inside the bar and the clown costume in particular are what tip off the defense team to the fact that the bus definitely was there when Joel was outside and likely was still there when Joel got into whatever attack happened to him. The clown costume is seen in the bar for 3.5 minutes past where the police estimated that the bus had actually left. So the clown thing, it's interesting because we know he's in the bar. We know he's kind of behind the rest of the group. He's the last of the bus partiers to go out there. Is it possible that he exited the bar, came up on the scene, seeing his brother being involved with this brutal attack, wasn't going to rat out his brother, decided to get those guys onto the bus and head off, and then was thinking about what had happened and that he might have had some responsibility for this guy's life ending because he didn't do the right thing and step up and ask for help, try to call an ambulance. I mean, this case is already brutal just at the outset. But then when you consider the fact that someone did this to this man and the possibility that someone else might have seen that coming into it late and still didn't do the right thing in terms of calling some help, I mean, who knows? Seconds might have been the difference between Joel staying alive or Joel passing away. This is a guy that's literally drowning on his own blood. If help could have got there sooner, it's possible that there could have been a different outcome. Could that be part of the reason why we have John in his clown costume found crying and shaking later that night? I would believe that 10 times over, believing that he's having a flashback to when he got his butt kicked in a parking lot. It just, once again, it's just, these stories do not feel real. None of the bus riders who have testified so far have said they saw an altercation aside from the Wavra stay fight, nor has anyone told jurors they saw anyone with blood on them or anyone who looked like they had been in a fight leave the broken drum on the bus. That's a pretty curious statement because we know the hunter did have a fight. So there was indeed someone that had a fight on the bus. Is it possible he didn't have any blood on him? It's possible, but it's also possible he did. We see at least 2 pretty good cuts on Travis's eye. The bus riders and Dirk, who drove to the bar, have said they have not conspired to protect anyone who was involved in a fight with Lovelien. And I really think that I actually believe that. I think there's something else going on here. I don't know if the fight was happening on the other side of another car or a van, or the view was obstructed from the bus to where this was going down. I think there's some simple mechanic like that going on here that we don't know about. I find it really hard to believe 40 to 50 people would all conspire to cover this up. That would be some serious control that you would have on a very large amount of people. Now, admittedly, we don't know who makes up this bus, but if some of them didn't even know one of the guys that was a passenger on it, I would say the mix was probably pretty loose. It probably wasn't, everyone that was on a hockey team together or something along those lines. I think that we've probably got a mix of people that's going on here. Would they all lie about this? I really struggle believing that. But then, of course, we have the other occurrence that happens later that night. Steve Rasaka, 49, told jurors he was walking that night from a friend's home to his house. He hadn't been drinking. He said as he approached his house, a man in a yellow sweatshirt was following him. I took that he was rather intoxicated because he couldn't walk a straight line, he said. The man eventually came up behind him and took a swing at him. Rasaka got out of the way and looked at the man, noticing blood on his forehead and a bandage on his right hand. He said he then went inside, got a baseball bat, and came back out, but the man was gone. So, first of all, we get another instance of an attempt at violence from Travis here, but we also get another description about blood and the fact that it is on his forehead specifically. So once again, unless we're considering a situation where Travis laid down for a period of time with his eye wound still bleeding, I don't know how blood got all over his face in the way that it's being described here. Detective Michael Scholes, who twice interviewed Travis Stay in the days after Joel Lovelien was killed, found himself on the other end of interrogation as the defense cross-examined him. Attorney Peter Wold pressed Scholes on the police's timeline of events. Wold focused on whether the party bus that brought his 24-year-old client to that bar left before or after Lovelien, 38, was assaulted. Now, this attorney in particular, Peter Wold, I believe that he is the one that put together, this is a PowerPoint presentation, and there is some information in it where it's basically kind of a transcript of the cross-examination that's going on against Detective Simon. So I want to share this with you guys because I really believe that a big part of why this case is going to go the way that it winds up going is because of some of these particular assumptions that the investigators made. So let's go ahead and do this. So the attorney says to the lead detective, "But your process of elimination, sir, assumed, and when you charged Mr. Stay, when you put in the affidavit you're speaking of to charge Mr. Stay, your conclusion, it was a conclusion, it wasn't a maybe, it wasn't the bus possibly could have still been there. Your conclusion was the bus was gone before Lovelien was attacked." He answers to that, "I thought that's what the evidence showed, yes." The attorney then continues, "You hadn't gone through this videotape like this at that time." And he's referring to the videotape that shows the clown still in the bar after this time frame that they think the bus has left at. He answers that, "Not this extensively, no." The attorney continues, "That's why in your mind, the bus had left before Mr. Lovelien had been attacked. Your process of elimination eliminated every one of those guys, right?" And he says, yes. So that is a big problem. That's a big blow to the case because at that point we know that they weren't even considering anyone on that bus being involved with this attack, which once again points to, okay, well, what kind of investigation did they do of these guys? Even if they were looking to talk to them as witnesses to what was going on there, the forensic testing that was going on, like in Travis's example, where they're looking for, where's the sweater you were wearing? We don't know if they even asked these guys for their costume. So that, I believe, raises a considerable amount of doubt about the investigation. It seems like they just got locked onto the possibility that Travis did this. And it's tough because, I'm sharing the info with you guys. And even when I'm going through it again, I'm like, this is pretty compelling information. We've got the victim's blood on him. We've got him attacking 2 people that night. We've got him being described as having blood all over his face. Not to mention, I didn't even mention that the next day he disappears, and supposedly because he's so hungover, he sleeps for almost, the entire day. We don't know if it's truly because he's hungover or if he's dealing with what was going on. He doesn't bring himself into the police until about 2 days after this happens to talk to them about what's happened. But we do have him showing up at the police, no attorney, giving them everything they're asking for. He does seem genuinely surprised when they're questioning in a way where he thinks that they're considering him. I don't know. I'm like a 50-50 split on this case, just right down the middle. Another article at Grand Forks Herald. The cowboy had his say on Wednesday. Bryce Larson told jurors he and his friends did not assault the 38-year-old father, challenging the version of events Travis Stay's attorneys have presented throughout the trial. Coming out of the bar, Larson testified he saw a scuffle between the hunter and the man in yellow. After the fight broke up, Larson said he told Stay he couldn't get back on the bus. Later, he said he and 2 friends went over to Stay, who was in the parking lot with a man in green. Larson testified that he told the man in green, "He's your problem now," referring to the injured Stay. Once again, just kind of interesting. How is he his problem now? What does that mean? Or is it that Larson is assuming that Joel is going to give him a ride home or something like that? Just what is that statement? I really wish we had better clarification on it. Larson said that on the bus, as it left the broken drum, he saw no one, including himself, who had blood on them or looked like they'd been in a fight. I've already mentioned I'm kind of interested in that because we know someone was in a fight. Larson did acknowledge he lied to police that night when he told them he hadn't seen the fight between Wavra and Stay. So we have him lying about seeing the fight. We have him lying about his identity, his birth date. We have him getting physical, needing to be handcuffed. We've got a lot of dishonesty coming out of this character. And now we're looking at information from him in a court case to help determine the truth of what's going on here. They also covered some lab evidence. Blood from Lovelien and the defendant were on the sweatshirt and the pants that Travis Stay wore. The defendant's own blood was found on the shoe that he was wearing that night. There's no indication of an unknown third person's blood on any of the samples analyzed. Stay's blood was not present on any of the samples from Lovelien's jersey. Now, I think that's another kind of weird gotcha. If his eyes were damaged so much that the blood that was pouring all over this guy's face that was noticed by the cab driver an hour and a half later and the guy that he attacked in between there, if it was that kind of wound, how did none of it transfer to Joel while he was attacking him? And what's interesting is the blood spatter analysis is kind of indicating that if Travis did attack Joel, he was standing above him, his legs were spread open, and there's some spatter that is actually happening kind of in the front and the back of his shorts, on top of what's getting up onto his sweatshirt as well. So if he is standing over him in that position, why is none of that blood that's all over his face dripping onto Joel? We also know that Joel was likely on his back the whole time because none of the blood basically ran down Joel. There's no sources of blood where it looks like he was in a standing position when he was bleeding. All the blood is basically going the wrong direction. So what is the outcome? December 17th, 2008, Travis Stay found not guilty. After 9 days of sitting through witness testimony and legal sparring, shrill outbursts and cries of relief filled the courtroom when the not guilty verdict was read after about 6 hours of jury deliberation. Joe Friedberg, another one of Stay's attorneys, said he thought the forensic evidence, especially the blood spatter analysis of Stay's clothing, tipped the scales in the case. I think it came down to the scientific evidence, he said. I think the biggest thing that we did was hire Mr. Kish, who sent his report to Mr. Labor. After reading the report of Paul Kish, an expert hired by the defense, Terry Labor, a blood spatter expert called by the prosecution, revised his conclusions about the victim's blood found on Stay's sweatshirt and cargo pants. Labor added the possibility that blood could have gotten there from expiration, basically coughing, choking, or simply breathing, as well as a scenario in which the spatter was created by blows to Lovelien. Grand Forks County State's Attorney Peter Welt, who didn't try the case but monitored it throughout, said, "We're disappointed. There were 350 odd exhibits, hours of testimony. When the jury comes back in 4 or 5 hours, you are always concerned. We feel like the trial was conducted very well and that the jury was given ample evidence to convict. We respect the decision of the jury, although we disagree that was the correct verdict." The fact is, whatever the verdict, someone got away with the murder of Lovelien, Wilt acknowledged. But his office has no other route to go on this case, and it's over, he said. Quote, "There is no evidence that anyone else was involved with this murder. The trial for the murder of Joel Lovelien has been conducted." In addition to the charge of murder, jurors also found Stay not guilty of manslaughter, a Class B felony defined as recklessly causing a death. Now, I'm really curious about that angle on it too, because even if we rule out the possibility that Travis was the attacker, we know for a fact that Travis was at least a witness. We know for a fact Travis is not the one that calls the police. We know for a fact Travis basically flees this scene. While he may have not necessarily caused the death, at least according to what the jury believes, I don't know. I don't know if there's any room in that definition of manslaughter for him not taking actions to actually help that situation, and then maybe obstructing justice for him fleeing the scene of a murder. I'm very surprised that there were absolutely no charges that came out of all this. They did have one of the jurors speak up. This is December 19th, 2008. Jurors didn't just find Travis Stay not guilty of murder. The vast majority believed he was innocent. So said juror number 11. Based on our conversations when we went over the evidence, 11 of the 12 jurors didn't think he did it. The juror approached the Herald to talk about the outcome because of criticisms of the verdict. During the 2 nights since the verdict, the juror has had trouble sleeping. "My unrest comes because I don't want the Lovelien family to think ill of the jury," the juror said. "Our hope is that the police and state's attorney keep looking into the case. Someone might crack it someday." And the one dissenting vote said he kind of thinks he might have done it, the juror said. After going through the evidence again, the vote was 12-0 after only 6 hours of deliberation. So there was one person that it seemed like was on the fence about the possibility, but that was pretty quickly overturned. Blood evidence actually played in Stay's favor. Travis was cut and bruised from his earlier fight, yet not one drop of his blood was on Joel, the juror said. I totally agree. That almost seems beyond reason, but we do have transfer going the other direction. We know that he was there. He might have not done it, but we know that he was there. And why don't we have the details around that? Because he was blackout drunk is the excuse. How is that possible? And he was supposed to have hit Joel, but his hands weren't beat up enough to cause that kind of damage. How do you beat someone up that bad and not have the bruises to show for it? It didn't make sense for Stay to turn on Lovelien, who was coming to his assistance after Stay was in a fight with James Wavra. The prosecutor said, "We have an angry kid, yet we couldn't figure out why Travis would have been angry," the juror said. "There was no motive, which is one of the elements of guilt." I do not understand the logic behind all that, unless the jurors were not told of the other 2 occurrences, but we know that they were at least told of the one where the guy was walking home and Travis tried to attack him. What was the motive in that case? Because we clearly know that there was an attack that was attempted. And it seems like the guy didn't know Travis at all. Was there a motive in the earlier attack when he got into the fight with the hunter? Not that we've been explained or told. So holding this trial to, we need to understand the motive, I don't know if that's really a fair or just thing. And I know that in some cases, you're never going to understand the motive. So trying to get into the psyche of someone that is willing to do something like this to another person is not always a level, easy thing to understand. So, but it's so weird to me because in this particular case, we basically have the guy saying, I know I was out of my mind. I was blackout drunk. And we have other people saying, yeah, he attacked me. He attacked me. I don't know why. But for this instance, yeah, it doesn't make sense. You're right, it doesn't make sense. None of the three, at least none of the two we know about attacks make sense. And then potentially a third attack. But it's weird, guys, because I still don't know if I really believe that Travis is the one that did this attack or not. I'm more curious about the discrepancies in the conversation that has come from the cowboy and his two partners when they're going out there to talk to Travis. The logic of all of that, them going out, what they're saying, none of that works for me. It's just completely unbelievable from my perspective. But we do also have Travis comment. This is from twincities.com. Travis Stay says he's not surprised that jurors acquitted him of murder because he knew all along he was innocent and he's happy to be going home for Christmas. He said he does not remember what happened after he went to the bar on the night Lovelien was beaten last fall. He told police he had about 10 drinks that night. I'm pretty sure that number is not 100% accurate. How would you know? You're supposedly blackout drunk. Stay says he plans to return to the University of North Dakota to finish his nursing degree after spending time in his Princeton, Minnesota home over the holidays. That does not happen. He actually does not continue with the nursing degree. He winds up switching gears and is working to become a lawyer. At least from the information that came out in the Dateline episode, he was working at the same law firm that defended him. So we also have some comments here from some very upset people, Joel's loved ones. Joel Lovelien's first wife and fiance say they're fighting the temptation to be bitter. I believe that someday it won't be an earthly justice, but someday God will take care of it, said Heidi Marto, Lovelien's ex-wife. And that's the only way I can go on. And that's the only way Joel would want it too, said Heather Eastling, Lovelien's fiance. Both women said there's no doubt in their minds that Stay, 24, killed Lovelien, a 38-year-old father. How do you get blood in the crotch of your pants? Not just the front of your crotch, the back crotch too, if you're not standing above him while blood is being spattered? Eastling wondered, referring to Lovelien's blood found on Stay's clothing. The prosecution called 32-year-old Eastling, who was with Lovelien at the Broken Drum Bar that night he was assaulted, to the witness stand, an experience she described as nerve-wracking. I knew I had to get through it for Joel, she said. It's hard to go back and think of that night again and tell exactly what happened. Eastling, who was to have married Lovelien in August, said she wished she'd been more cognizant that night and remembered more specifics. Neither woman found fault with how the police or prosecution handled the case. I'm struggling with that aspect because I know we talk about really tough cases on this channel. I know that they are unsolved cases, so there's always some form of criticism towards investigators. Despite all that, for this particular instance, them not recognizing that one of the bus partygoers was still in the bar when they had videotape that was showing them that, I think that is a big, big miss. Because of that one missed detail, there was a whole branch of the investigation that I believe would have gone considerably different. Of course, that is just me as a commenter looking at this from the outside, but I'd be very surprised if the detectives that were involved didn't agree with that assessment. But let's continue here. Eastling and Marto said the experience of losing Joel has brought them closer together. Marto, who met Lovelien in 1990 and is now remarried, said Alexa has handled the loss and now the verdict better than she has. Her attitude since Joel's death has been no matter what happens, it's not going to bring her dad back, she said. Of course, Alexa makes a really good point, but we also have people that still might have some information out there that could at least bring the truth out. Maybe justice isn't going to be served as they're talking about in this article in the way that we want it to be served. But if the truth could at least come out, if the families could at least understand what's really going on there, they might be harboring feelings towards Travis that he doesn't really deserve. There might be someone else that should be getting the focus. There could be potentially someone else who could even be charged in this. So in the description box below, I am including a website where you can submit a tip to the police in North Dakota if you happen to have any information that you think can help with this case. We've got a lot of people. There was about 80 people in the bar, 40 to 50 people in the bus. That's a lot of eyes. That's a lot of ears. I really, really believe there's some other information out there that has not been handled by the investigators. And if it points to another suspect, this case needs to be reopened. They need to dust off that district attorney and tell him, let's get this thing rolling. Let's do this thing right. And let's make someone pay for what has happened to Joel here. This is a guy that was acting as a good Samaritan and had his life taken. I did find that there is a memorial fund or a memorial scholarship that has been set up in Joel's honor at the University of North Dakota. I think that is really touching. I was really happy to see that. As I mentioned, in the description box below, contact information, a website where you could submit a tip to the Grand Forks Police Department. I also have a link down there to a Web Sleuths thread, but it's really just a bunch of links and only a few posts. There's a pretty good Reddit discussion that's going on. I'm going to have a link to down below as well. And finally, Robin Warder of The Trail Went Cold also did a podcast version of this story. I'm a bit of a fan of Robin's, so I want to include that in the links for you guys down below as well. What do you think, Brain Scratchers? I'm still just split right down the middle on this. I think there is a possibility that police had the right man, but unfortunately their process left big enough holes that the defense team was able to just kind of obliterate them in court. I think there is a possibility that they didn't have the right man, that the right man is likely someone that was part of the bus crew. Maybe those three gentlemen with the stories that are very, very tough for me to swallow about them going out to give this guy some grief and then they wind up just chatting about sports to someone else. The believability of that just falls right through the floor for me. Or potentially there's something else going on here that we just don't know about. Could have been someone else on the bus, could have been someone else in the bar. There's a lot of people that are around this situation, but why was there not a witness? I don't know. Why would Travis have fled the scene? I don't know. Especially because he was there. He was there either in the act of Joel being injured or in the act of Joel dying, depending on which professional analysis you believe in. So why does he flee the scene? Why does he not go for help? Why does he not call police? Why does he not call an ambulance? Why does he wind up trying to take a swing at someone later? I don't know. I'm really, really struggling with this one. What do you guys think? Let's talk about it. Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of Brain Scratch. And I hope, if nothing else, that we can all look at the past two cases that I've covered here that are Halloween themed and seem to be happening around bars. And just be safe out there. Just be safe out there. Go with a big group of friends. Don't go off without your friends. It's really not worth it. There's a lot of people. Everyone wants to have a good time, but you've also got people in costumes. And as we saw in this case, I don't know. Does it help? Does it hinder? I still don't feel like we have the truth. I still feel like there's a lot of people wearing masks in all this. Take care, everyone. I'll see you back here on Monday with a brand new case cracked.